Maybe you're considering the Haven on your next Norwegian cruise. Why wouldn't you? You've got beautiful cabins, your own private spaces, your own butler and concierge, VIP everything, priority everything, what's not to like? But it comes at a cost. It's a pretty hefty price tag to stay in the Haven. Is it worth it? What are the pros and cons? Well, stay tuned and we'll discuss. Hey everyone, my name is Tim and my channel is called Tim at Sea. I'm a huge fan of cruising, usually solo, and my goal is to just share some useful tips, tricks, and other information that will hopefully help you make the most of your cruise vacations. So I'm sitting here today on the Celebrity Edge to talk about a Norwegian cruise. A little strange, I know. I just returned from a 7-day cruise on the Norwegian Encore to Alaska. I originally booked a club balcony suite, but through the Upgrade Advantage program that Norwegian offers, I was able to put in a bid, and I got upgraded to a courtyard penthouse suite with a large balcony. I'm here to tell you about this experience because it's the first time I've ever stayed in the Haven, and I'm going to give you my opinion on whether or not I think it's worth it and what some of those perks are. So let's begin with a brief overview of just what makes the Haven so special. Well, first and foremost, you have the cabins themselves. They're going to be typically quite a bit larger than a standard room you'd find throughout the ship. They're going to have nicer furniture, bedding, amenities, all that stuff. They're going to have nicer bathrooms, larger balconies typically, and access to a lot of spaces that you wouldn't normally have. Depending on which ship you're on, you'll usually find Haven rooms scattered throughout the ship. And on some ships, they have a private Haven area that also has all the rooms there. So you have quick access to things like the private Haven restaurant, the Haven sun deck, and on some ships, the courtyard. Haven guests also get priority embarkation and disembarkation privileges, both at the beginning and end of the cruise, but also anytime you're in port. You're going to be the first ones on or off the ship. You also have your own private concierge, who can do things like make show reservations for you, dinner reservations, pretty much anything that guest services can do right there in the Haven. And then of course you've got your own butler who takes care of your room. They can do things like bring you food and have it set out in the table in your room or on the balcony. And pretty much anything else you can ask them to do, they're going to bend over backwards and make sure that you have the most amazing vacation you possibly can. If you book your Haven cabin somewhat in advance, they'll call you about 45 days before your voyage begins to ask you preferences on things like what you like to drink, food preferences, and that sort of thing. And they'll bring you snacks and drinks and put them in your cabin based on those preferences every day. Many of the Norwegian ships also have a private Haven restaurant that only Haven guests can visit. This typically will have higher end food options, although it is the same menu every day on the cruise. But many have told me that this is the best food on the ship. I experienced this myself a little bit, and I did enjoy it quite a bit. Next, we'll talk about some of the private spaces that come on the Haven. A lot of ships have courtyard areas with an indoor pool and private hot tubs just for Haven guests. They're lined with beautiful, comfortable lounge chairs, and in some cases almost like mini little cabanas. They're really comfortable and nice, and relaxation is prime in these areas. You also get the Haven Lounge, which is like an observation lounge just for Haven guests near the front of the ship typically. You have your own sun deck that you can sit out on with these beautiful, comfortable lounge chairs set out there, usually with their own private hot tubs in this area as well. You get reserved seating for the larger stage shows that are on board, so you don't have to worry about getting there super early to get a good seat. So now that we've discussed all the pros of staying in the Haven, there's really only one con that I can think of, and that would be the price. So in my experience, these cruise prices for Haven are really high. They're about 2 or 3 times higher than the next lowest stateroom category on the ship. And in my experience, they're also a lot higher than other offerings from other cruise lines with similar perks and benefits. The question becomes, is it worthwhile for you to spend that extra money to be in Haven? As a matter of fact, I've actually had a lot of people tell me that once you've booked a room in the Haven and stayed there for the first time, you'll never go back to a standard stateroom. Whether that's true or not, obviously, is going to depend on you and your preferences. But I'm just going to spend a little time talking about whether I thought it was worth it and if I would consider doing it again on my next Norwegian cruise. So at this point, the video sort of moves over from fact over to my opinion about things. And I'll admit that I was on a little bit of a unique sailing. I was in September 2021. The cruise industry had just sort of started up again after the COVID situation calmed down a little bit. There was only about 1,900, I believe, people on the Encore when I sailed, even though it can hold almost 5,000. So a lot of this had a dramatic impact on my opinion of staying in the Haven and whether it was worth it or not. So when I arrived to the cruise port in Seattle, those Haven benefits started kicking in right away. After I did the COVID test, got the results of that, and was headed up to check in, I was sent to a specific Haven area that only Haven guests could access, where I checked in. There was no waiting. It was a beautiful lounge with hors d'oeuvres, breakfast items, pastries, drinks. It was about 10:30 in the morning when I arrived, and it was just a really, really smooth check-in process. I had to wait about an hour before the concierge came and took us on the ship. As a result, I was probably in the first 50 people who got on the ship, so I was able to walk around and explore things right away without anybody else there, which was really kind of a surreal experience. On embarkation day, the American Diner is free for Haven guests. Normally it's an upcharge to eat there, but as a perk of staying there, you could choose to eat at the American Diner or the Haven restaurant. I chose the diner for my first meal, had myself a really tasty burger and some mozzarella sticks, so I was definitely off to a healthy start on my cruise. My room was ready as soon as I got on the ship, and being that I was in the courtyard penthouse, I got to walk through the courtyard for the first time and experience just the sheer beauty of this place. It's just a really stunning location with a beautiful water feature, nice hot tub, and its own pool, and the lounge chairs were just out of this world. From there, I checked out my cabin, and it was about what I expected. It was slightly larger than a club balcony suite would be. It had a slightly larger bed, some nice furniture. It had its own little table to sit at, a cushy armchair, and the balcony was about twice to maybe 3 times the size of a standard balcony, which was really nice. The bathroom was probably the star of the show. It had a dual sink and a really nice rainhead shower with body jets and everything. The bathroom was really nice, especially for someone who's 6'2" like I am. Those tiny showers, they're not much fun in standard rooms. Be sure to check out my room tour video, which I will link to in this video, so you can check it out. In terms of my experience with the Concierge and Butler, I'd have to say it was positive for the most part, but I didn't really use it a whole lot. The concierge I did go up to and ask a couple of times, just some general questions about the ship and activities and that sort of thing. The 2 main stage shows that are typically running on the Encore were not running on my cruise, unfortunately. So Kinky Boots and Choir of Man were both dark for this voyage, so there was no VIP seating to be had for those. I was able to get a reservation at the Ocean Blue restaurant, which was full according to the app, but just asking the concierge and he took care of that for me with no problem. Other than that, I didn't really use the priority disembarkation at the ports. My tours left a little bit later in the day, so I wasn't in the first group of people wanting to leave the ship, so I didn't really have to experience that. I was able to just go to the gangway and walk off without any wait anyway. When you get back on the ship from the ports, there is no Haven area to get back on, so you have to wait with everyone else. So that's just something to think about too. As for my butler, I actually didn't meet her until the 2nd or 3rd day of the cruise, I believe. So I never really asked anything of her. She did ask me if I had a preference about the food that they bring in for snacks, but since there was so much other food to eat on the ship and I was basically constantly eating, I didn't really need any more finger sandwiches or cookies or anything else that she brought. They were certainly appreciated, but definitely didn't need them. The one thing I did ask for that I'd heard you could get were gummy bears, and she said they didn't have gummy bears on this sailing, so that was a bit of a disappointment. So really the only thing I asked the butler for they couldn't do, but I think she would have bent over backwards and done everything that I would have asked had I had anything to ask about. In terms of the areas on the ship that are reserved just for Haven guests, I did mention that I thought the courtyard was absolutely stunning. Really enjoyed my time there. I didn't see a single person in the pool the entire cruise. There was occasionally a couple people in the hot tub, but I generally had that to myself if I wanted it. It was just a really relaxing and quiet area. The concierge actually came around and asked me once if I wanted a drink, and occasionally there were other times where people would come through and ask if I needed anything, even though I was the only one in there. The sun deck was really great for when we cruised through the Glacier Bay National Park in Alaska. It was less crowded there, and it was just a great place to view without a lot of people standing around and blocking your view. There's also a lot of really comfortable chairs up there. At the sail away, I chose to sit in one of the hot tubs that was in the Haven sun deck area, and I was the only one up there. It was just really nice. Sit in the hot tub during sail away. I would definitely recommend checking that out. I'm not much of a drinker, so I didn't really frequent the Haven bar, but I've heard that the bartenders there are typically the best ones on the ship. So I saw a lot of regulars there as I walked through every night, but not something I really use myself. In terms of the restaurant, I did eat breakfast there one day, and I had lunch one day. And yes, I did think that the food was a step up definitely from the main dining rooms. I was kind of disappointed with the main dining rooms on this particular cruise, but the Haven restaurant food was good. It wasn't spectacular, I wouldn't say, but I didn't eat there for dinner, so I guess I can't give it a really good review based on that. But the food I had was solid, and the service was great, so there wasn't much more I could say about that. I definitely enjoy peace and quiet on my cruises and just relaxation, and the Haven definitely delivered that in spades. But I kind of feel like I would have been delivered that anyway on this voyage, just because there just weren't that many people there. It wasn't super crowded, and I never felt like I would have trouble getting a chair anywhere, getting into a restaurant if I wanted to, or getting to do any of the activities on the ship. It was just not that crowded, and it was a great experience, but I probably didn't need the Haven perks as much as I typically might have wanted them on a more full voyage. Same with the priority on and off service. It was a nice thing to have, especially when we disembarked the ship. I had an early flight, so I was able to just go down a private elevator and get right on the bus, basically. But from what I hear, nobody really had any trouble getting off the ship at any time that they needed to. It was really quick for just about everybody. So I guess that takes us to the final question of whether or not I thought it was worth it. And the answer to that, I would say, is yes and no. I don't regret that I did the bidding to upgrade to the Haven and that I was able to check it out for the first time. My room was definitely great. The private spaces were beautiful, and I appreciated the services of the concierge and butler, but I didn't feel like any of it was strictly necessary. I didn't feel like the room was that much better than some of the other rooms. Obviously, there's these huge suites and so forth that you can book at astronomical prices, and mine was kind of the lowest end suite you can get in the Haven. But in general, I just didn't feel like the room was 2 or 3 times as good as like a club balcony suite. Circumstances that might have made it more worth it would have been like if the ship was completely full, if there was lots of kids on the ship, if the main priority of the cruise was just relaxation and peace and quiet, then definitely I would consider it. Obviously, if you have special needs and you can make use of a butler and concierge a little bit more than I could, then definitely the Haven would be a good choice for you. Of course, if money is no object, but I'm not sure that that's the case for most people. I would definitely consider trying the bidding option in the Upgrade Advantage program if you're thinking about trying the Haven but are just a little pushed away by the pricing. It was a great way to experience the Haven for the first time at a lower rate, but just keep in mind that you lose out on that 45-day phone call that you would get with your food preferences. I think if you called your butler as soon as you arrived and basically had that conversation, then that wouldn't have been an issue, but there just wasn't really much that I needed, so I didn't feel like I needed to do that. So I think that about wraps things up for today. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button down below, click the bell icon like all those cool kids ask for. Really helps me out, helps out the channel, and hopefully gets this video into the eyes of more people who are interested in it. So now I'm going to turn it over to you. Have you stayed in the Haven before on Norwegian? Did you think it was worth it? If you haven't stayed, what's holding you back? Please leave your comments and questions below, and I'll try my best to respond to them, and hopefully we can help other people looking at making this decision themselves. So thanks again for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one.